Godzilla 2014 just ended, but we're just getting started here on post-show recaps, recapping Godzilla, the newest movie that just came out. In I'm Zach Brooks, and I'm joined with Tyler Smith here on post-show recaps,
Hello.
and we're here to talk all about Godzilla. We just saw it. We just saw everybody get destroyed by Godzilla and the Mutos, and we're ready to break it all down for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think Tyler, the first question I had for you is: if are you familiar with a lot of the Godzilla movies?
I am to a certain extent. I grew up watching just kind of. I have no idea how many there are. I think are there like 300? Are there 20? I don't remember. Or is it probably somewhere in between?
I
But
feel
I've
like it's
seen.
probably like 20 or 30.
Okay.
If we're talking international versions too.
Okay. I've probably seen probably about a dozen from when I was younger. Um, I saw him fight, Mecha Godzilla and Ghidorah and that sort of thing. And then I saw Godzilla 2000, which was delightful and lots of fun. I saw the terrible Roland Emmerich Godzilla, which I feel like barely counts. And I was very excited. I knew that it was just a matter of time, what with technology and with just the utter disaster of the Roland Emmerich '98 Godzilla, that it was just a matter of time before somebody tried to make it again. And when I heard it was Gareth Edwards who made a film called Monsters, which is available on Netflix and is absolutely worth seeing, I was very excited. And so my exposure to the Godzilla series is fairly extensive, but also kind of old. Like not necessarily recently, more from when I was a kid.
And I am actually fresh to the Godzilla franchise. I never got around to seeing the Roland Emmerich version, and didn't see Godzilla 2000 either. And I feel like I've seen clips of Godzilla here and there. Everybody's seen a little bit of Godzilla, but I wasn't real familiar with the story. So for
Mm.
me, I didn't know. I mean, all I knew was that there was going to be a giant lizard-looking thing attacking cities,
Okay.
and that's all I knew about this story going into it. Besides what I'd seen in the trailers.
Okay.
So,
And
um,
so what did you? Let me ask you this, because so many of us, including I assume the viewers, like you said, there's cultural osmosis. You just sort of absorb stuff about Godzilla. Um, but and so to the point where we don't even think it's like silly at all. Did you, as you were watching the movie and being kind of fresh to all of this stuff, did you think it was ever silly? Like when the time comes and he blasts blue flame out of his mouth, did you say like, this is kind of goofy, or did you just go with it?
I really liked it. I thought it looked awesome. And I guess we're jumping right into kind of
I'm sorry.
spoilery. Oh, that's what we're here for. So if you've not seen Godzilla, hit pause on this podcast, go see Godzilla, and then hit unpause and listen to the rest of this podcast. I recommend it. I thought it was a good movie. Would you recommend somebody goes and sees it?
I think so, and frankly, I wanted it to be a little bit better than it was, but then that's usually the case with me. But yeah, by and large, I liked it. I recommend it. I think it is definitely a theatrical experience. Do not wait for Blu-ray.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we're about to spoil the hell out of this movie and talk about
Yeah.
everything that happened. So if you haven't seen it, spoiler, 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 hit pause, go watch it, and come back. All right, now that we're with only the people who've seen it, I thought the Blue Flame was awesome. I loved it.
Okay.
And I loved the way that he killed the Muto, where he's holding the head and he shoots so it was blue flame, not like electricity.
I I think it's flame. I mean, it always had in the older movies and stuff. It always had a different, a vaguely electric quality to it, but it also was kind of like fire. That's the thing. It's Godzilla's fire electricity stuff. Like I don't think it has any particular property. But you know what? There are probably Godzilla nerds that know way more than I do, and they probably know exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I just assumed it was more electrical because there was so much with electromagnetism in the movie.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought that that's what we were dealing with, but it seems like fire. It just wasn't the color of fire. It was blue.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you're if you're a Godzilla fan, and this happens with anything, like any, if you go see a comic book movie with a character that hasn't been on in film yet, uh, and you see and you know something here, oh man, here we go. And so as you saw his spikes just one by one start lighting up, I remember the 8-year-old in me was like, oh man, I know what's coming. And there it is. Ah! And it just, and I was such a, like I'm 32 and I like to fancy myself a film critic who has, like really, it's like really strong taste in a nice nuanced type of film. But sometimes I turn into an 8-year-old boy. This
I mean, I think
movie
that
did it.
that's a really good quality of this movie is that it calls back for the adults that go and see it. It calls back to their childhood, and for the kids that go and see it, it's they probably aren't familiar with Godzilla. I mean, I don't know a lot of kids that
Right.
have gone back and said, "I want to watch this Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie." Um, from 1998. Even though I myself am actually a fan of Roland Emmerich movies, and I feel like I probably should see that 98 Godzilla just to get the full experience, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
feel like
expecting
maybe.
much.
See, I saw Roland Emmerich films as they went along. So I saw Godzilla, his Godzilla in the theaters, and I would venture to say that might have ruined me for anything that came after. So I think maybe you watched them all out of order.
Hmm.
You might dislike it so much that it sours all the movies you do like. That is the effect of that Godzilla movie.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll check it out if I can find it. I don't even know if you can really find that anywhere. I'm
Well,
sure it's streaming somewhere.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure now it's readily available at places. Because even though it's a travesty of a film, the studio is like, all right, people are interested in Godzilla again. Let's release our terrible one that people will probably watch mostly out of curiosity.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting. That movie came out in '98. This movie starts in '99. So I
Hmm.
didn't know if this was any flashback or like connection to the '98 movie, a callback to it, or just a coincidence that we start the movie in 1999. And did you think that seemed like 1999, that opening scene?
I'm not really sure. I have a. I mean, I didn't see any particular '90s fashions, but at the same time, uh, everybody was in like hazmat suits and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe they look different in '99. I don't know. I didn't have exposure to that.
Yeah, I felt like Joe's outfit seemed like '70s or '80s. Um, and then I felt like the cell phone that he was using seemed like it came out after '99 to me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I tend to just sort of accept things in movies, which I probably shouldn't do. I should probably be a little bit more skeptical about stuff. I will say that Joe, played by Bryan Cranston, his general demeanor seemed like it came out of, you said, the 1970s. Everything about him seems like the 1970s. Like, what is that movie? The China Syndrome. Like, he just seems like this alarmist guy. He's got like the blazer. I wouldn't be surprised if there were little elbow pads on there, and just
Yeah,
he just had that quality to him, no matter what.
yeah. But I thought overall Bryan Cranston was really good in this movie. I think Bryan Cranston's always really good,
Mhm.
but I thought he did a really good job in his limited part. And I was a little spoiled that he was going to die. I felt like because in the opening credits it says and Bryan Cranston or with Bryan Cranston.
That threw me.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe he'll play a more supporting role. That was my assumption,
Hmm.
and that he will that this will be much more ensemble than the trailers made it look. And I mean, I guess that's kind of true, but I mean, we're jumping into this, right? Like
Yeah.
people, okay, yeah. I did not expect him to die in the first, like, what, 20 minutes,
Yeah.
25 maybe.
Yeah, he died and
Um,
then he came back and then he died again about 5 minutes
I
later.
I know. It really seemed like like you see him fall and you think, well, surely they're not going to kill Bryan Cranston, but the emotional beats felt like the kind of thing that they would do. So it's like, oh, mate, well, he was the and guy at the beginning of the credits, so maybe they did. And then when Ken Watanabe says, "Oh, I want him," you think, "Oh, okay, he's being loaded onto an ambulance. He's probably going to be fine." And then he dies. He
Yeah.
he dies. And you think like, man, this movie is jerking my emotions around.
I don't know why. For me, I just completely predicted that part of it. I think because I saw that he was the and guy, and so I was like, all
Yeah.
right, well, he's gonna have a small role, and then he's basically the entire movie for the first 20 minutes, and I'm like, all right, well, at some point his character has to not be in the movie as much, so
Yeah.
um, it kind
And
of killed a little bit of the emotional surprise for me when he was killed.
yeah, that is true. There's something about opening credits that I think we're trained to assume certain things. Like the and person is very seldom the lead, um, and there's a quality. It's like and Bryan Cranston. Like we know they might not even be a purely supporting role. They might be some like almost a featured role.
Hmm.
And the thing about a featured role is that they're not going to be around as much as we would expect them to be.
Yeah,
Um,
they surely marketed the hell out of Bryan Cranston being in this movie, though.
They
You know,
did, and I think that was smart marketing. Well, for a number of reasons. One is that people know who he is. He brings more people in than, say, uh, Sally Hawkins, who's an actress that I really like, but I think was mostly wasted in the film. But
yeah,
um,
she really was.
but the thing that got me, and this is I don't know if the marketing department cared about this, but by really playing up Bryan Cranston, and then we all go see it, and then you're absolutely right. I mean, he is front and center for the first 20 minutes, and then he's gone. I feel like it sort of throws the viewer into something of a tailspin. It's like, oh, we thought we knew what we were going to get in this movie, like we thought we were going to have a nice solid anchor with Bryan Cranston, the one guy who knows what's going on.
Hmm.
But now he's gone. Now we are left without an anchor. We have Ken Watanabe a little bit, we have Aaron Taylor Johnson a little bit, but this was the guy who predicted everything, and now he's dead. Who are we left with? And I feel like it subverts our expectations and puts us into kind of a sense of chaos early on in the film, to the point where it's like, well, I don't even know what to do anymore. And then, of course, it turns out that our anchor is Godzilla.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it that's I think that's a great analysis of that, and it really gives you the sense of similar to what they do on Game of Thrones, where nobody's safe in this movie.
Hmm.
And that's how I really felt after Joe's character died. I don't really feel like we lost that I can think of any other major characters to speak of,
We
but
didn't, but by killing him off early, we felt like we could have lost anybody.
mhm, yeah. And we talked a lot about the opening credits about Bryan Cranston, but I wrote down in my notes just the opening credits I thought was a great way to open it because it told the backstory of the 50s Godzilla
Yeah.
through the old news footage. And I thought that was a really great way to do that.
And the credits themselves, that little redacted thing that kept popping up.
Hmm.
I'm a sucker for a good opening credit sequence, and like the credits themselves, the footage, and the music. I thought the music, especially at the beginning, it felt like the music of a monster movie.
Hmm.
Like it's big and bombastic and ominous and all that, and but undeniably fun. That was a great opening sequence. Like it really gets you into the movie almost immediately.
Yeah, I thought it was really great. And then we start in the Philippines in '99, and we go from there.
Hmm.
Another thing, after we lose Joe, and then we jump, or well, I guess we'd already jumped ahead 15 years, but then we lose Joe's character, and Ford, his son, takes up the role of the hero in the movie.
Yeah,
Did you like Ford as a character?
sure. I mean, it's nothing against Aaron Taylor Johnson. I think he can be a good actor in the right role. I thought he was particularly good in Anna Karenina, and I thought he was pretty good in Kick-Ass as well. There's not a lot to his character. I feel like we were missing one scene. We got a little bit of it where he just wants to get home to his family, but I feel like we were missing a scene, and I don't necessarily think that movies should just have scenes where characters explain their motivation, but but in this one, I think it's a little bit okay. We've got monsters knocking buildings over. I think subtlety's out the window. Um, but I feel like we could have had a scene where he is explaining to somebody like, "Hey, I lost my mom 15 years ago. I just lost my father to basically the same thing, and I am not going to let my son lose his parents in the same way." Like that really seemed to be a driving factor. I mean, this guy, over the course of the first 20 minutes, we see him become an orphan. Now, of course, by the time he loses his father, he's an adult with a child of his own. But we see that happen, and I feel like the movie just sort of keeps it going, which is fine. There's no time to grieve and stuff like that, but you get the feeling that, oh, this him trying to avoid what has happened, or trying to spare his family the grief that he's experienced. I feel like that's a driving force that maybe could have been hit home a little bit more. So the character was fine. He was functional. But it is, I'll say this, there is a bit of a void left when Bryan Cranston dies.
Yeah, I was not Ford. I thought was okay. I thought he was a little bit bland. I thought the actor and the character both were a little bit bland.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, I wasn't rooting for him really. I was rooting for big fights and big destruction scenes. But I think my major complaint about this movie was just the story of Elle and Sam, and just I just don't know. There were all these people being killed all around you, all these characters being killed.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to care about this one person who we've really not spent much time with in Elle and Sam, and then reuniting with him. It just felt like there wasn't any. I mean, she's a very boring character.
Yeah, that's the problem with movies like this, and I wonder if I think it's just a problem that can't be avoided. Where anytime you show a movie that is on a grand scale, but you show it from a small, very human perspective, any character that we follow, there's going to be this question of, well, why are we following this character? What is it about this character that that makes us care about them more than other people? And I think ultimately it's just like, well, this is the character that they've given us, and that's it. I mean, strictly speaking, Aaron Taylor Johnson, his character in the story of Godzilla's first appearance in the 21st century, he plays a pretty pivotal role, and so we need to see what he cares about, and that's his family. And so it makes sense to a certain extent, but at the same time, yeah, it's, I think Elizabeth Olsen does a good job. I think really plays the emotions of that character, but at the same time, anytime it cut back to her and her kid, it's like we either need to spend more time with them or considerably less, because as it is right now, they wind up just feeling kind of like a distraction or kind of a perfunctory thing, almost like they're in there just because they kind of have to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt. I would have been fine if there was a lot less of them.
Yeah.
And we just focused more on the kind of battle side. I was thinking about it, and a lot of monster movies and disaster movies, you do see all these different perspectives, and you are kind of forced to care about the characters they show. One movie that I thought did it particularly well was Cloverfield, because it was all shot point of view. So the only characters you really cared about were the ones who you were following.
Yeah.
And
which
I thought
I never saw.
You never saw Cloverfield?
I didn't. I wanted to, but I never got around to it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it does a really good job telling a story from just one perspective, and I won't go too much into it, but I enjoyed that.
I'll watch Cloverfield. You watch the '98 Godzilla.
I don't think that's fair.
I don't either. I think you're the loser in this situation.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think could have been more interesting than following Ford and Elle and Sam. I mean, I'm fine with following them to a certain extent, but think about it. Like, we've got David Strathairn as this admiral who is not a bad guy, but he's willing to think purely in military terms, which is blow everything up. If all else fails, blow everything up. So we have him on one side. Then we've got Ken Watanabe on the other side, who believes in the inherent, maybe not goodness, but the balance that Godzilla can restore. Part of me feels like if we're going to focus on characters, let's focus on these two guys.
Yeah.
And we do a little bit, but not nearly as much as we could have. Like, first off, I hate to say it, they're more interesting actors.
Mm-hmm.
And they have sort of opposing viewpoints. It seems like we could have the two of them kind of go head to head, at least philosophically, and have them be debating a little bit. Then we ourselves are like, yeah, which one is right? I mean, I can see both of their perspectives. I don't know. I feel like they missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think that we saw a little bit of that, but we definitely could have seen more of the two perspectives, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. That hey, nature's going to balance out. Like, these two are going to take care of each other. We need to, we should not meddle and try to blow up a nuclear bomb. That's a horrible idea.
Right. But that's the thing. That's one side. The other side is, yeah, I guess if we don't blow up, if we, I guess if we use that nuclear bomb, people could get hurt. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'll let these 300-foot monsters destroy San Francisco and kill lots of people. Like it's basically which option kills less or kills fewer people, and just trying to weigh those options. And at the end of the day, it's like we might kill a bunch of people with the nuclear bomb, but we would kill these monsters as well. Whereas if we leave them alive, then yes, Godzilla might kill the hang on, Muto, not Motu, right?
Yeah,
Muto. Okay, yeah,
Muto. Yeah,
Muto. Okay, Godzilla might kill the Muto, but then he's still wandering around, and whether he wants to or not, he's killing people. And so it's, I feel like there is a good argument to be made on both sides. Ultimately, I side with Ken Watanabe, obviously, but like, um, but I feel like they could have really explored that more, and they explored it a little bit, which was fine. I feel like they gave David Strathairn his character. I feel like they gave him his day in court as far as his motivation and such. Um, but yeah, it just feels to me like that would have been, I feel like that would have been a better strategy from a human perspective. And I guess neither of those guys are ever really in physical danger, so they need to put us kind of in the middle of the war zone. So I understand that, but
yeah, and I liked following the guy who ends up being kind of the hero of this whole story. Um, yeah, outside of, I guess Godzilla was also the hero. In the end of the movie, they show Godzilla walking away on the news footage, and it says like "King of Monsters, Savior of our city."
yeah,
And I was like, well, I don't really know if this actually happened, would the news be applauding Godzilla? I feel like they would be like, both of these characters, both these creatures are terrible. Like, I don't think they're gonna call anybody the savior.
yeah. Even if one of them is voluntarily walking away, it does seem like the thing at the bottom would just say, "We're all doomed."
Yeah,
Uh,
monster
forever.
destroys the entire West Coast, and now is leaving to come back at some point that we won't be ready for.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, and I wasn't planning on getting to this until later. I apologize. We were going to do a recap thing, and now we're already bouncing all over
Yeah,
the
we're
place.
just jumping all over.
But that's all right. Frankly, there's not a whole lot of there's not a lot of huge plot points to discuss anyway.
No, I feel like
Um,
it's just like different locations where they transfer nukes to.
yeah. It's like, all right, monsters are destroying this city. Let's bring the nuke there. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, they're in a new city. Let's try this again. Um, the thing that got me about this film that really affected me, and I saw the film with my wife, and she said the same thing. So I feel like the filmmaker did a good job of establishing this. And it comes during that sequence that we've all seen so many times because it was in the trailer, which is the Halo jump.
Oh, that was great. That scene was so great.
I love it. I love the use of the music. I like that on the plane you see them emotionally preparing for what they're about to do. I mean, you see one guy praying over everybody. Like, it really felt like this is what it would be like if this were to occur. These guys know that they are probably not going to be coming back, but they're doing a bigger thing for humanity. So I like that whole sequence. And then as they're dropping, and we see it from their point of view, and we see one guy literally just go right past Godzilla's
Yeah.
face as
Oh,
he's
great.
fighting the Muto. Damn it, that's gonna happen. I feel like that's in my head now. Um, the thing that got me was like, wow, he just went by Godzilla's face, and Godzilla doesn't even care. And that thought, Godzilla doesn't even care. The Muto, yes, the Muto doesn't even care. That that struck me so hard. This idea, these things don't even know we're here. We are so small, so insignificant. These things didn't show up to terrorize us. We are incidental. We might be an annoyance to them a little bit, but not very much. Like, Godzilla, that's the thing that I find interesting is like Godzilla, savior of the city. It's like he doesn't even know we're here. He just needed to kill those things, and now he's going back to business.
Yeah,
So good for him for not staying and killing us all, but that has nothing to do with us. And it really, I went to WonderCon this year and I saw a Q&A with the director. And one thing that he really wanted to try and convey, and it comes through in the film, I believe they even give voice to it with Ken Watanabe, this idea that we keep feeling, we as humans feel like we've subdued nature, we've taken care of it. Now we're in charge. But anytime there's a tsunami or an earthquake or something like that, we suddenly realize we're not in control at all. There are major things that we can't do anything about. And this movie really did a good job of establishing that by having these two big things that we have no control over. We do what we can, but we have no control over, and they're going to do whatever they want, and it doesn't matter even that we're here.
yeah.
It's like nature's bigger than us significantly.
And we see, I mean, we see that so much in the movie. You know, the destruction of buildings is not that Godzilla is like, oh, I hate this building, I'm gonna knock it down. It's just like, oh, Godzilla's tail hit this building and destroyed it, or you know,
Yeah,
Godzilla stepped on 100 people and killed them.
yeah,
And we see, like, we're shooting guns at Godzilla throughout the movie and rockets and these giant weapons that kill humans. And
yeah,
it's like, it doesn't, you know, maybe it's like it tickles him and he's like, oh, what is this? But really, you don't see much reaction at all from any of our human weapons to him.
yeah. And it's just, and that, I mean, good for them because by the end of the movie, part of me was like, well, this was depressing. Like in a good way, where what they were trying to explore came through, and that is that Zach, you and I, we do, and anybody watching, boy, we do not matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I actually after I left the movie, I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw a friend of mine had written a blog post that said this movie is, what is it, like anti-global warming, or like saying global warming doesn't exist and we should just let nature take its course. It's like, all right. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think going back to the skydiving scene or the halo jumping scene, um, I think that was such a great scene in this movie. And you talked about when they just go right by Godzilla's face and you see just a really small part of Godzilla from their perspective, and you can't hear anything. You can't hear what's going
Yeah,
on. And it just, I really felt like I was the one falling and falling to the ground. And you know, they say, you know, some of you are going to hit skyscrapers and not make it, and it just, it's very matter of factly.
yeah, that man, this does do such a great job of establishing that there is definitely a price to collateral damage. Literally, these guys are jumping down, and some of them, they might not even die by way of the monsters that they're trying to stop. They may die simply because they hit a building. Like
Yeah,
one could say that death is so inconsequential, but of course it's a necessary death because you got to have a bunch of guys jump out, and statistically some of them aren't going to make the jump itself. And it's just like, and I love little details like that. It really made it really made it all seem very real. That's a question I have for you. Um, did this seem feasible to you? Like possible? As
parts
possible
of it.
as giant movies can,
Yeah, I
giant
mean,
monsters can.
you know, I try to look at it like, you know, what would actually happen if this happened, if giant monsters started fighting, you know, in San Francisco or in Washington D.C. What would the reaction be? I think the reaction would be a lot more chaos than it was. I don't think people would be as organized and orderly evacuating. I mean, we see it even when there's a hurricane that hits. People
Hmm.
aren't organized. You know, when Katrina hit, people were not organized and orderly getting out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
And um, I think that aspect of it, and just some of the, like, the coincidences that the Ford and his family just seem to be very close to each other a lot, but just barely missing.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, overall, I thought that it did a pretty good job. I'm trying to think of other movies that have done this kind of destruction, and you know, when it has seemed real. Um, and I think this one did all right job.
I thought, and you know what? Here's the thing. From as far as making it seem real, as far as crowds, I think Spielberg's War of the Worlds does a good job. But as far as what you're talking about, like the family always being close to each other, and then why are we following these people specifically? War of the Worlds is just as bad as any of the others. Like,
Mhm.
where he's got to make it to Boston, and the one house standing is the one where his family is.
Yeah.
I think it's Boston. I don't remember. I haven't seen the movie in a while, but yeah. Let me ask you. Okay, I do think it would be more chaotic. I feel like it wouldn't hurt to show a shot of like very short-sighted people looting,
Mm.
which is something that does happen in disasters. And I know some people would say there's monsters running around. It's like, yeah, but there are people who always think in terms of, yeah, these monsters aren't going to be around forever, and now I got to get mine. And I
Mhm.
feel like that would be a nice little commentary on the short-sightedness of man. Um, but the other thing that got me, and I go back and forth on this, um, they told this from a very human perspective, which is good. I think that's as it should be. But in doing so, I feel like everybody became really, really okay with the fact that there are giant monsters around.
That's I feel like that's the news reporting on it, and I didn't know if it was supposed to be a little bit funny, but like when they're like, oh, savior of our city, and some of the other headlines that they showed the headlines of the news a lot, like the breaking news alerts, and it was just like, you know, thousands dead because of monster. It's like, I don't know if the news would react that rationally to it.
I don't know if anybody would react rationally to it. Even Ken Watanabe, there's at least one moment when Godzilla is approaching, and this is a character who's been studying Godzilla his whole life, and he's never actually seen him, and now he has the chance to see him, and so he goes like above deck or whatever you'd call it. I'm sorry, and and he says, I have to see this.
Mhm.
And that's the only amount, that's the only real wonder and awe that we get. And I understand there's only so much awe you can have when everybody's dying, but it does seem to me, especially somebody like David Strathairn's character, the military guy, it does seem like there needs to be people. If you'll pardon me, I believe it's a PG-13 movie, but it does seem like somebody somewhere needs to say, "Holy shit!
Yeah.
What are we? Everything about our world has changed in our own eyes
Yeah,
in a matter of moments."
yeah, I mean, everything after that moment, everything changes, and I think, we talked about what movie really shows it realistically. I think Pacific Rim does a good job of showing after the fact what happens.
Which, oddly
It,
enough, I also did not see. I wanted to, but I didn't hear great things about it.
See, I love Pacific Rim, and Pacific Rim is basically this movie is the first 5-10 minutes of Pacific Rim,
Hmm.
and then the rest of it is like society's adjusted to this happening.
Yeah,
Um,
and I like that. I like the idea of a movie coming to grips with what would it be like to live in a world where, all right, this is the world we live in. Everything is different now. Um, Almost like a zombie movie to a certain extent. Like after the zombie apocalypse has happened, and now you see people just trying to readjust their thinking to this is the world I'm in now. It's so
because
different than what it was before.
I mean, not only is everything destroyed, but there's also now the threat that this Godzilla, who we've already established does not care about us at all,
Yeah.
might just come back onto the shore. And he just left and went into the water, and he could turn around and come back at any point. Um, so
Yeah,
I think there's just that fear hanging over people now, and we don't really see much of that at the end. I think we just see relief that families are reunited at the 49ers stadium.
yeah, I feel like whenever the inevitable sequel comes out, and I think there will be one. I've been looking at the box office reports, and the film's doing very well, as one would expect.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's when we'll really get a sense of what is of the world of Godzilla. Like, for example, in the sequel, if it is determined that Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, maybe like Portland or something like that, coastal cities that they're basically abandoned. People have moved inland because they know this could happen at any time. I feel like that shows an understanding on the part of the filmmakers that, like, okay, the world, people now understand that they live in a world where monsters come from the ocean and kill them. So they want to get as far away from the ocean as they can.
Yeah. I think that would be a really interesting way to do the sequel, and I hope the sequel is not just like Godzilla versus, you know, Red Godzilla or whoever, Godzilla versus the alien.
Yeah, I'm interested to know which monsters they're going to go with. Are they going to go with Mecha Godzilla. I don't
It,
know.
is the Muto a common Godzilla enemy?
Well, Muto, I think, is just kind of the name that they came up with, like something unidentified terrestrial object. It's just what they came up with for short. But I know that the one with wings is, I think, supposed to be like Mothra.
Okay.
Um, so I think it's supposed to be a direct reference to these things. Um, but I don't. I'm interested to see in the future when they bring more monsters in, are they going to give them names as well, like Ghidra, like Mothra, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I wondered if Muto was a callback to an original Godzilla character, and they named it's massive unidentified terrestrial organism. But
Okay.
I wonder if that was just kind of a tongue in cheek callback to, hey, this is called Muto, and we're gonna give it a reason to be called Muto, even though they didn't really give a reason to calling Godzilla Godzilla besides that it was just massive.
Yeah, and then they start. Yeah, then they start just, and it's really weird to hear like David Strathairn very casually say, "All right, where's Godzilla?"
Yeah,
And it's maybe because we're so familiar with the name that to hear this very no-nonsense general just say it, it just sounds very strange. But that's, uh, here's the thing. So I went and saw a midnight show of it last night, and the first time that Ken Watanabe says Godzilla, I apologize to anybody in the audience who might be offended by what I am about to say, but he does say it in a rather thick accent, so he says like Godzilla, like he says it like that. Um, and people in the audience laughed. And it was kind of a laugh of recognition of like, hey, I remember it's being said that way in these older movies. Did that happen in your theater at all?
there wasn't any laughter at that point,
Okay.
but I feel like I acknowledged that as well, and was kind of waiting for that moment to happen, and it
Yeah.
didn't. And his character's name is Dr. Surazawa,
Oh yes.
Ken
It's a nice name.
Watanabe's. So, and I thought he was a really good part of this movie. A little bit what you would expect for a Godzilla movie to have, but I thought he did a really good job. I also feel like we didn't see a lot of him towards the end. Towards the end was a lot more of just the action and not
Yeah.
anything and not any of the planning going on.
And maybe they thought that like because like you said, yeah, they remove a lot of the planning, I think, because they recognize A, there's a certain pacing that needs to happen, and B, well, the plans are done. Like there's no more plans. We're all out of plans at this point. And so that means that David Strathairn and Ken Watanabe are not going to play as big of a role. But it does seem like I agree with you. I think the incorporation of him as an Asian actor and acknowledging and having some of it take place in the Philippines and in Japan, it at least acknowledges that this is something that as a franchise, Godzilla started elsewhere. It did not start in the U.S. Even though this is an American film, and it takes place mostly in the U.S. That's where most of the destruction takes place. I feel like they gave a nice nod to this did not start here, and even though we have now taken it and it is now ours, and this movie's going to make a lot of money, it didn't start with us, and so we should cast at least one notable Asian actor.
And it's interesting
Maybe
you say it's interesting that you say that the movie or that the story started elsewhere and the Godzilla franchise started elsewhere because we see the movie starts in the Philippines. We see all the scenes in Japan, and then the American military comes and they say, "Oh, you're with Monarch. Well, it's ours now. We're dealing with this," and it just
Yeah,
kind of takes over, which is very almost like meta to what happens with the film franchise.
yeah, that's a great observation because Monarch is all about studying, and admittedly, they don't always know what they're studying, and one can make the argument they make things a little bit worse, but they still have a respect and kind of an understanding for what it is they're dealing with, and the military, again, the military not being a bunch of bastards, they just are more concerned about, all right, well, we have our own goals here, and now we're taking your thing and we're making it ours. You can still advise us. We're not going to listen to you, but you can still have a part of this. Yeah, that's great. It's a nice little, meta thing there.
Yeah,
Um,
and
and that
bring
didn't
your
even
bring
occur
your
to me.
friend who's going to die soon.
Yeah, the other guy who understands this. Yeah, we'll definitely put forth all our best effort to keep him alive. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Um, Let me ask you this, because I feel like this is something. It almost feels like Jaws in this sense. The first time Godzilla shows up, we get a nice presentation of him, but we don't see the first big monster fight except on TV.
And I loved how they did that. I loved
Okay.
how they kind of teased it. So
Yeah.
you'd start seeing the fight, and then it would cut to the news footage of it. And that was
Yeah.
actually the first time the audience really laughed in the theater I was in. Um, then we see another fight, and the doors close, and you don't see the fight. And they
Yeah.
kept teasing these fights and teasing seeing the full monsters. And part of me was like, come on, just show it already. And the other
Yeah.
part was like, all right, they're saving it for the end. And especially when you have a movie like this where if you have to build up to bigger and bigger fights. I mean, if you have a fight right in the beginning and there's all this destruction, well, how do you build off of that? How do you make that bigger?
Yeah.
So you just hold back and you hold back, and then finally you show this big fight at the end.
And
So I
that's
thought that was
and
good.
yeah, and I felt that same thing too. Again, it's the 8-year-old inside me. The 32-year-old that's like, "Oh yes, absolutely. You got to tease it out and build to something big." That guy was gone. The 8-year-old in me was like, "I want to see it right now. I've been waiting a year to see this." But thankfully, I came to when they finally showed the big fight, it was so much more satisfying because of what had come before.
Yeah, I wish the marketing department got that memo, and I feel like they did for the first couple trailers. They didn't show much, but
Yeah.
then the more recent trailers showed the entire body of Godzilla. They didn't really show
Yeah.
the fights, but they unlike Jaws or unlike some of these other monster movies where they hide the monster.
Yeah.
The trailers showed this right away. And my brother actually, I saw it with him, and he actively avoids seeing trailers because he doesn't want to be spoiled. So he hadn't seen that, and he couldn't really understand what I was talking about when I said that.
I did up until WonderCon. I did a pretty good job of avoiding stuff to the point that I didn't. I was like one of the only people apparently, but I didn't know there was another monster in it. I thought this was just going to be Godzilla descending upon the city and people trying to deal with him. I did not know that it was going to be monster fights.
Oh, I didn't know
Uh,
that either.
oh,
I
really? Okay.
No, I knew it was going to be Godzilla, but when I saw the Muto, I was like, "Oh, that's weird. That doesn't look like Godzilla. Is it going to like transform into a lizard thing?" And it wasn't
Yeah.
until they started explaining what the Muto was that I was like, "Okay, so they're going to fight." And then I thought it was going to be something where there is really no good guy and no bad guy. It's just kind of fighting. But I
Yeah.
felt like towards the end of the movie they made, and they even say like Godzilla is the savior, Godzilla is
Yeah.
the hero.
And I feel like that's an interesting thing. Like that sort of personifies. First off, I actually before I say that, I do really like that Godzilla is not the first monster we see, but we expect that is going to be the first monster we see. And then when this other thing bursts out, I had the same thought you did, which is, well, wait a second. I thought that's not Godzilla. What did I just pay to see? What did I just pay exorbitant 3D prices to see? Um, but the but that idea of it feels like it'll be neutral and we don't know if there's going to be a hero or a villain. It does sort of speak to whether they meant to do this or not, and I think they might have because I think the director is an intelligent, sensitive artist who is really trying to make the most of the movie that he has been hired to make. Um, just as people, and certainly as movie watchers, we have this tendency to want to sort of force things into a familiar story, especially heroes and villains. Strictly speaking, is there some like there's nothing more villainous about the Muto than about Godzilla. I mean, it's just an animal. It's a male and a female trying to procreate and make more of themselves. I mean, they do sort of identify themselves as a parasite, but there's nothing inherently evil about parasites either. There's no, but we tend to think, well, if these things continue, we'll die faster. So they're the bad guys. And Godzilla kills them, so he's the good guy.
But I felt like yeah, I feel like it should have just been they are the bad guys, and I think that's what the reaction if this happened, would have been. The reaction to this
Oh,
movie, or
absolutely.
to this happening, would have been, we hate both of these things. Do whatever you can to kill all of these, and that was
Right.
sort of the reaction. So to see a little bit of the hero ness of Godzilla, um, and really, I don't think there necessarily is a villain. Like you said, there's not a villain and a hero in this movie,
Yeah.
um, or there shouldn't be. It's nature, and I think that's
Yeah.
what Dr. Sorozawa's character is trying to say.
And one thing so I will review movies over at my website, Battleship Pretension, and I've been going to a lot of these Disney nature documentaries. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They are, of course, beautiful. They're gorgeous to look at. But the thing that bothers me more than anything is that there is definitely a Disneyfication of these stories. And I'm not opposed to Disney, but what I do recognize is that Disney has a very clear goal, and that is to make things acceptable for a wide audience, especially a young one. And so one thing that always bothers me is that they will take these stories that are it's just nature, and that's it. And nature can be a little brutal sometimes. But there's one called Chimpanzee, which is awful. Again, beautiful. If they had taken the narration out, it's gorgeous. But they incorporate narration, and they impose a story onto it, and they have this one ape who's particularly like an alpha male, and they call him like one of the characters' names is like Buster or something like that, and he's like kind of this cute little chimp and stuff. And then there's another character, another chimp that they call Scar. They literally call him like they give him the name
Of
of
the bad guy in
the
Lion
worst
King.
villain ever in Lion King history. Maybe not the worst ever, but the guy who kills his own brother. That's pretty rough. Um, and literally, like Scar doesn't do anything particularly worse than any of the other chimps, but they need a story.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we might not root for anybody. And how could we ever watch a movie where we're not rooting for somebody and against somebody else? And it feels like, in a good way, it feels like that's something that the movie Godzilla is doing. Is it understands, like, the characters within the movie, we have a desire to characterize things as good or bad depending on how it affects us. Godzilla probably is responsible for as many deaths, maybe
Yeah,
even more.
I feel like, I mean, he's got the huge feet that are coming down. I feel like that
Yeah.
must have killed a lot of people.
Yeah, and the tail,
Yeah,
it's
the tail whip was great too.
but because he opts to leave, we're like, all right, we've got our hero, a savior of the city, and it's like, I don't know, there are times when I feel like the movie is very cynical, and this idea that you and I were talking about earlier, this idea of um, that these monsters don't care about us, but because this one's leaving, we will put this label on it as it's the savior of the city. It's like, yeah, until it comes back.
Yeah, and
And
I just wonder how, I definitely prefer movies with a darker ending and
Mhm.
overall darker movies. I think it would have been a great ending if Godzilla gets up and then just shoots fire at all the people, and that's how the movie ends, or something
Yeah.
where it's like it's just not. We got the happy ending for the most part. Godzilla destroys the Muto, and the Brody family is reunited at the stadium, and
Yeah.
somehow they're reunited. Um, and I guess that's the satisfying ending, but the part of me that wants the crazy finish that you're going to have everybody talking about. I think if you had some dark ending to this that was not what you expected from a summer blockbuster, it would have been uh, people would have been talking about that.
That I agree, and I do think, yeah, they wouldn't have done that with a summer blockbuster. But that man, and that didn't even occur to me, is just have him get up and say, "All right, now I'm in charge. Now that
Yeah.
these things have been taken care of, now it's me." And that's the thing is one of the, when he gets up, turns around and goes back to the ocean, everybody's applauding him, and I think, yeah, but even that trek, he's probably killing somebody.
Yeah. I
Uh,
just thought it was very quick to be to be saying this guy is the hero. I mean, who knows if he's
yeah,
going to he's just going to Japan now to kill
yeah.
people in Japan. Like, we don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, but that's us. We're like, hey, look, as long as he's not killing Americans, we're happy.
So
Um,
does Gareth Edwards just hate America? Is this what he's just making America seem like the bad guy?
well, he is British,
Okay.
and I'm sure they're still, you know, angry about the Revolutionary War over there.
Yeah, probably.
So, but I feel like I had something else to say, but now I don't remember what it was. But that's okay. We've talked quite a bit already. But
Yeah. Uh, should we see if we have
let's
any questions? And if you have questions, you can post them on Twitter using the hashtag PS Recaps, or you can post them in the chat room for this group or for this page. And we'd love to take some listener questions if we have anybody with questions. I have a couple
all right.
random discussion questions if we don't. So, so Scott, while we're waiting for anything posted, one of my discussion questions I had was just what was your favorite battle location? So we saw destruction in San Francisco and Hawaii, in Las Vegas, in Japan. Where did you enjoy watching destruction happen the most?
Vegas.
Yeah. I love the scene inside the casino where nobody even knows what's going on, even though it's on the TV and you could see Godzilla coming, and then the lights go out. Or I guess it wasn't Godzilla; it was the Muto coming.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great sequence, and that speaks almost to what you and I were talking about like looting, which they didn't have. That even in the midst of things, people are still pretty oblivious to the needs of humanity in general, and they will focus only on what affects them. And so they're not looking at the TV, and they only pay attention when the lights go out because they can't gamble anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I liked a lot of the stuff on Hawaii. It made me actually want to go visit Hawaii, which I don't think that was the reason for it. But I have a friend who just moved to Honolulu, and I was watching. I'm like, man, I should go out there and visit him. That looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the Hawaii Board of Tourism would be really thrilled with this film.
Yeah. Was there any doubt in your mind what was going to happen with the kid on the little tram car, the small Asian kid who comes to get the toy from Ford, and then the doors close and Ford has it, and you're like, okay, well he's not just going to return with the kid. Like there's going to be some attack that happens.
Yeah, that sequence was a little strange, and I feel like they could have, and maybe they kind of did, use that as an opportunity to develop Ford's character, and I guess they do. I mean, he is a father, and so I'm sure he sees this sort of as his own son. But I don't know. It just seemed that whole sequence seemed very strange.
Yeah,
almost like it wasn't enough. It's like I'm still rooting for Ford to live. We don't need to bring a kid into this. It's not like until the kid shows up, I don't care if he lives or dies. I still want him to live. We don't need to put this other thing on it as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed there was so that kid came to play with the G.I. Joe, and then they show Ford's son Sam sitting watching the TV, and he's playing with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And I thought that was definitely some kind of intentional like Easter egg, and I actually really liked how they did that.
Yeah, I did too. I thought that was very effective.
I'm trying to think of some other scenes that I really liked. I love the train bridge scene where the Muto goes under the bridge and then destroys the bridge and people fall off. I thought that was another great sequence in this movie.
That was great, especially because in a movie like this where it's just widespread destruction, you don't expect quiet suspense sequences. But it was rough. Like, as they're walking on the bridge in the fog, and you don't know what's coming. You don't know what's under the bridge, over the bridge, on the other side of the bridge. You don't know if there is another side of the bridge. Like, that was a great sequence. Mm-hmm. And that sequence is something almost right out of Gareth Edwards' earlier film, Monsters. That film is almost an entire film of that. Just small groups of people walking in the darkness, trying to keep their eyes out for any danger and not knowing if the danger is going to come. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. More than anything, I want people to go and watch Monsters as a function of this. It's a smaller budget, so the scale isn't nearly as large as it is for Godzilla, but you'll see a lot of the more memorable sequences from Godzilla. You'll see them sort of in Monsters. You'll see the seeds of them in Monsters.
Yeah, I felt like I had heard of Gareth Edwards, but I had not seen Monsters. Has he done anything else that I would have heard of, or is that really his one famous movie?
I think he's done more stuff, but I think Monsters is sort of. I have no doubt that that's what got him this job. But yeah, I mean, he's done some documentary stuff and some TV stuff, but that's basically it. The only other feature film that he made was Monsters, and that did get him some acclaim. At least the movie got him some acclaim. Like it's something that a lot of people I know had at least heard of, if not seen. But it is definitely worth checking out. It's really good, and it very much is that human scale again.
Oh, great. So we do actually have a question on Twitter from
Oh, how
Antoine
exciting.
VGR.
Ooh.
He says, "What is your box office prediction for Godzilla after it goes off movie theaters?"
Oh boy.
And so far, it looks like it's made about 80 million already.
Oh man. Um, so basically, for its entire theatrical run, that's what we're thinking of.
Yeah.
I'm not great at box office predictions. I either wind up going way high or way low, and I never really know. But I would venture to say, like, I don't know, 400 million.
Oh wow. Okay. So I mean, I guess that's
Wait,
probably actually
are
that's
we talking
probably
worldwide? Do you think?
sure. Yeah, worldwide. I mean, it's going to be huge.
Okay.
It's going to be huge in Japan, and it doesn't open in Japan until July.
Oh.
So I feel like 400 million. Actually, at first I thought that was really high, but I mean that might actually be even kind of low. It might be like 500 million. I'm not
Yeah.
also not very good at box office predictions.
Yeah, I might be a little conservative in that from a worldwide perspective because I didn't even think in terms of like, oh right, Japan,
Yeah.
the place where all this started. Maybe they'll go see it. Maybe they won't. Who knows? Maybe they feel like, oh, the Americans co-opted this. Maybe let's not see it.
No, I think it's going to be huge in Japan.
I think it probably will be. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it'll be huge worldwide. I mean, if Gareth Edwards is British, I mean, people in
Yeah.
Europe are going to want to see America get destroyed. I'm sure.
Oh, no question about it. People
Yeah.
seem to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I bet Al Qaeda will love it.
Yeah. There we go. It's a movie for everybody.
Exactly.
Uh, so, is the bomb at the end of the movie a nuclear bomb?
Yeah, I believe so. It's like an incredibly powerful one. There's a real quick scene where somebody explains because the idea is they're going to lure the monsters towards the bomb with the radiation that the bomb could give off, but then they're going to blow up the bomb. And the idea is that the nuclear aspect of that bomb is not going to kill them, but the sheer force of it will. That's the theory. And so I believe, yes, I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, and how did so? You know, this reminded me, and I guess I might be spoiling another movie, but this reminded me a lot of the end of The Dark Knight Rises,
Hmm.
where this bomb is set off. It didn't seem like it was that far away from the city, yet nobody seemed to be harmed from a nuclear bomb going off in San Francisco.
Yeah, at least Dark Knight Rises, the bomb is attached to an aircraft that is flying pretty quick. This is attached to a a whale watching boat.
That somehow had an automatic navigation system in it. It didn't work because the electromagnetic pulse, but
Right.
still.
Well, it always fascinates me when we like nitpick stuff like this in a movie with giant monsters in it. But I think that's the thing, especially these days, as movies try to make it seem like certain things are possible in the real world. Like, I mean, there's a reason that you mentioned Dark Knight Rises. I mean, we're talking about a movie about a guy who dresses as a bat and fights crime. That should be unbelievable, but we've come to expect that. We've come to accept that to the point where then when something that is genuinely unbelievable, when that does happen, we're like, hey, come on now. I could buy the giant monsters. I could buy the guy dressing up as a bat. But you know what? You've lost me with your nuclear talk. But yeah, that's just one of those things that I accept. And it's like, yeah, sure, let's go ahead and say that boat managed to get, let's say, 40 miles out.
Yeah, with a 5-minute timer on the bomb.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I thought that was like, I just thought that part at the end was a little bit unbelievable, and also, again going back to my dislike of the characters of Elle and Sam, when Ford is at one of the military camps, and the FEMA guy's like, we have not found Elle and we have not found Sam, and he doesn't have some huge like directory of people. He just is off the cuff knows who these two random people are that happen to be this guy who's not even serving with that platoon, knows their family, but those were just the little nitpicky things.
I believe he is talking to a FEMA guy who's talking about who has like a registry of people, and I think he says we've found Sam, we've not found Elle.
Mhm.
So as far as like, or maybe it was the opposite. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I think it's a situation like that where, well, they haven't checked in,
Mhm.
and so that's I'm okay with it. I do think it's a little far fetched, just in general. We're dealing with at this point millions of people possibly checking in, and I frankly don't think FEMA would be so organized as to feel like it's to feel confident that everybody who's alive has checked in. Obviously,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I had a question for you. Something that occurred to me. Uh, so the main family in the film, their last name is Brody. I feel like that's got to be a reference to Jaws, right?
Oh, it reminded me of Homeland. I couldn't stop thinking about the show Homeland, which I really don't like, but I've watched a lot of it. And they're like Lieutenant Brody, and that's one of the main characters in Homeland.
Oh, and I didn't see. I've never seen Homeland. Man, there's a lot of
Save
stuff
your
I
time.
apparently haven't seen. I haven't seen.
Don't bother with Homeland. Watch the first season if you really want to, but nothing past the first season.
That is what I've heard. From what I hear, you should start watching Homeland, then move on over to The Americans, which is apparently a much better film.
Oh, I've heard that's
Show.
really good. I haven't watched that one.
Yeah,
But
Brody
yeah,
is. It's
it
a
could
good
be a
name
reference to
for.
Jaws.
I feel like it is. It just has that. Like we're dealing with regular people dealing with a big monster and trying to figure out what to do about it. And we have, with Cranston's character, we have a guy who is saying things that nobody else will really believe, and that sort of thing. So I feel like it probably is an overt reference. And I remember, incidentally, a year or two ago when I was on my own website when I was doing I occasionally will do fantasy casting saying, hey, if they ever remade this movie or whatever, this is who they should cast. And I remember saying that Bryan Cranston would be a good Chief Brody.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could put Bryan Cranston in any role, and he'd be great.
That's kind of true. He can have an everyman quality, but he can also seem like he could be I think he'd be a good supervillain.
Oh, definitely.
There was for a while talk of him being Lex Luthor, right? But that didn't happen.
Yeah, I wonder how serious that was. I think people were just like, "Oh, it's the bald. He's a bald guy, and he's a great actor."
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, your reference to Jaws could be right on because we don't see the fights until the end. The movie ends on a boat,
Yeah.
or the last scene ends on a boat. There's a lot of coming up through the shoreline, so
Yeah. There's
we might be digging
basically
for something, but I don't know.
there's
I like to think
basically
that's
the
cool.
equivalent of like the shark fin and Godzilla's spikes just kind of going along in the water there.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't actually know. I assume Gareth Edwards is a fan of Jaws because who isn't? But but I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted there to be a direct reference there.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I saw just a couple other movie references. One, you mentioned how Godzilla kills the Muto. There's a little bit of King Kong in there, like by grabbing its mouth and pulling. Now, of course, he doesn't pull it open. He just, oh, it's such a satisfying thing where, oh, Godzilla has figured it out.
Yeah. Oh, it was really great. There was cheering in the theater when that happens.
Oh, awesome.
And it was really like it kind of mirrored a little bit. I thought the two Mutos when I wrote down like the Muto love scene when they passed the
Hmm.
bomb to each other, and you could see there was like the I don't know if that was their mating or what that was, but
Yeah.
then we have the eggs that are laid, and the egg structure looks really cool too. I really like that scene.
Yeah, that was good, and that reminded me of something from the movie Aliens, where Ripley sees all the eggs from the Queen there. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up the Muto love scene, because for a brief moment, you realize it is just two animals looking to procreate the way animals do, and there's nothing inherently wrong with it. You
It just
know,
affects us.
it just affects us very negatively.
Yeah.
But it's just for the briefest of moments, it's like, yeah, there's nothing actually wrong with what these animals are doing. They still need to be dealt with by as much as we can, but there's nothing like inherently wrong with what they're doing. So I liked that. There was just a brief moment of that.
Yeah. No, I thought a lot of the scenes where they showed the Mutos handling the weapons and handling the submarine and stuff, where it made like you said we talked about earlier, it makes everything look so small compared to them.
Yeah,
They were
and
just so massive.
and this idea of, I like that they keep going back to the idea of radiation, the idea of nuclear weapons, because in humanity, the most destructive thing we've ever created is the nuclear bomb, and we've used it. And it's considered like just one of the, I mean, certainly we've had Holocaust, like we've killed each other on a pretty grand scale, but as far as like one thing that can kill tens if not hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, the nuclear bomb is it. That is our greatest destructive achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that these things basically eat them, like, that's a nice little metaphor for, it doesn't matter how big we get.
Yeah.
These things, it's nothing to them.
Yeah, that actually the nuclear bomb could help them. By blowing up a nuclear bomb, it could give
Yeah.
them more power.
Yeah.
So,
Boy, oh boy.
yeah, no, I
There's,
mean,
you know what?
it
I really
made you
talked
feel
myself
small.
into liking.
Yeah.
It makes you feel small, and that's what we go to the movies for. Certainly,
exactly.
movies like this.
So, did you see this movie in 2D or 3D?
I saw it in 3D. I did not see it in IMAX 3D, and if it wasn't so damn expensive, I'd probably recommend that people see it IMAX 3D, because I feel like the bigger the better. I don't think that 3D was completely necessary. I saw it because that was the most convenient showtime for me to see. But I think seeing it as big as possible is probably for the best. So
Yeah.
IMAX, I don't think there's IMAX 2D. So IMAX 3D is probably what I would recommend.
I saw it in 2D, and I thought it was good. I'm not a huge fan of 3D movies.
I don't really like them either.
Right. I think I saw Pacific Rim in 3D, and I like that. But
Okay.
if it's a movie that really lends itself to 3D, that's fine. But when it's like, oh hey, and you can see Captain America in 3D just because, just as like a money making grab, I'm not a huge fan of that. So.
Yeah, some movies were made with 3D in mind. Some of them, the directors really, I'm not a huge fan of Gravity, but it's such a theatrical experience, and it's such an inherently 3D experience that part of me feels like if you're not seeing it in the theater in 3D, you are actually missing out on the best possible way to see it. And
yeah, I traveled about 45 minutes to go see that in IMAX 3D because I knew I had to see Gravity like that.
And that is not a thing I say very often. I usually think that movies that are, even if they're made for 3D, they probably do okay in 2D. But that was one where I feel like that Alfonso Cuarón is a director. He tends to make very immersive experiences. So I assumed that the 3D would be the way to see it, and it was. And unfortunately, my wife gets motion sick, and so there are a couple moments when she felt like she was going to throw up because it was very immersive.
Oh man! Well, don't take anybody who's motion sick to this movie in 3D either.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because that sequence you and I were talking about of the Halo drop, and then it goes inside the mask of somebody that's dropping. I feel like that would probably throw somebody a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, so it's a movie that you would recommend. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think it's a fun movie to see in the theater. I think it's good for a summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just talked about the Halo drop scene. That and the bridge scene were my two favorite scenes in the movie.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'd give this 10 out of 10, but probably a good 7 out of 10.
I don't think I would either. I think the thing that I like the most about it is, and this may sound counterintuitive, it's a movie about giant monsters destroying cities as they fight. That's not very subtle, but and it's possible to shoot that in the biggest way possible, and at times Gareth Edwards does, but for the most part there's a lot of restraint. The bridge sequence, the Halo drop sequence, and then not showing us fights immediately, that speaks to a filmmaker who understands that sometimes smaller is better because it gets us it puts us more in, I don't know, it meets us more where we're at. If he had gone big immediately and just stayed big, then we would feel like we're on the outside looking in. But by keeping some things small and kind of intimate, it pulls us in more so that when things do go big, we feel like we're right in the middle of it.
And we're ready. We're excited. Like we're ready for it. We've been primed. We've been teased. We're ready to get into this fight.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why I was really on Dr. Serizawa's side when he said, "Let them fight." I was like, "Yes, let them fight."
Yeah.
Last question I have: when do
Okay.
we see the sequel?
I'm gonna say 2 years.
Okay, 2016.
I hope it's Gareth Edwards again. Don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily like if for a director to get locked into like a big franchise, but he did it so well that that I'd be fine with bringing him in again.
Yeah, I think I'd like to keep the continuity and what you brought up. I'd like to see what the world looks like now that Godzilla has, and the Muto we know they exist.
Let me
How
ask
has
you.
society changed?
Let me ask you this: if there is a sequel, do you think they will, and do you think they should, um, basically just have a new cast of characters?
Yes, I think they definitely should have a new cast of characters. Maybe the only remaining holdover is Dr. Serizawa.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see a new story, even a new location.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, if they're staying in the Pacific, I guess there's not that many locations they could do. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I think we'll see a sequel. I don't know if we'll see it in 2016. I think it might be 2017. But I think
Maybe
we'll see it.
uh, it will make so much money that I think there will obviously be a sequel, and certainly the franchise of Godzilla lends itself to a sequel or 30.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think this has the potential to be just one every 2 or 3 years, maybe even more often. Who knows?
yeah,
But yeah, but if there is one, and if it's the same director, I think I'm looking forward to it.
yeah. Uh, it, my last complaint about this movie,
Okay.
I will say, I hated the name Ford Brody. I don't think anybody would be named Ford Brody.
Yeah, it's almost like what was it? Bruce Willis's name from The Sixth Sense. His name is Malcolm Crowe. it's almost like it's almost like the writers said, "All right, we need a name that sounds cool.
Yeah,
Malcolm Crowe, Ford Brody. You
I
don't run
mean
across
his
a lot of people with first name Ford."
no, and his father's name is Joe. His son's
Yeah,
name is Sam. So both of them have very normal standard names, and then his name is Ford. It made no sense.
yeah, it's yeah, it does seem like it's it's the name a writer gives one of his characters.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say maybe it was a Ford tie-in, but we really didn't see much product placement in this movie
I know.
outside of there was one shot of an LG cell phone. Otherwise, I didn't notice any other product placement, and I like that.
Well, if I was a company, I probably wouldn't want my product being readily destroyed,
Yeah,
which is all you're going to get in this movie.
yeah, that's a good point. So, do you have anything else on this movie? Any other thoughts, questions?
Nothing that I can think of. You know what? I will say, since we're ending now, I will say I kind of I don't know if there was a post-credit sequence. I kind of hope there isn't. I didn't stay, um, but I kind of love the way it ends. It ends with Godzilla going into the water, and then it just stays on the water, and it's peaceful. Cut to black.
Yeah,
Like
I don't think there was a post-credit scene because the lights came
okay,
on in the theater I was in, so I
okay.
assumed it was over.
But yeah, just the idea of like Godzilla, he goes into the water, and then the camera stays for probably a solid 5 to 6 seconds, and there's a sense of anticipation, like, okay, we're just watching water. What's going to happen now? And it ends the way that situation would end. It's like, all right, where people would watch people in San Francisco and all over the world, they would see this giant monster go into the water and just think, what next?
Yeah, we're back to calm, except the world has been destroyed.
Exactly. Yeah, calm because millions of people are now dead.
Yeah. So, well, Tyler, it's been a great time recapping Godzilla with you. I'm glad we both got to see this movie so quickly and do this recap
Absolutely.
together. Uh, Tyler, you want to tell people where they can find you?
Sure, you can find my website and podcast, battleshippretension.com. We have a new episode every week. This coming week, which is to say the episode that drops in a couple of days, features actor Doug Jones from Pan's Labyrinth and
Nice.
Hellboy and that sort of thing. So that was a lot of fun recording with Doug, and so that'll go up Sunday night, Monday morning.
Oh, awesome. That's a high-profile guest for you.
Yeah, and
Well, not
he's
for
been
you, but
on.
it's a high-profile guest. I don't know how high-profile your guests get, but
Uh, That's probably that high. But that's a big deal for us. When he showed up, he goes, "You're my fourth interview today," and I thought, okay, so he makes the rounds.
Oh man.
But he'd been on before, and it had been a long time since he was on. So it was nice to see him again, and he's just a really great guy. And we talk about movie makeup, and so we thought he'd be a good person to have.
I mean, with Hellboy and Pan's Labyrinth, I would think he's got a lot to
Yeah.
talk about.
He has a
So,
lot to talk about, I'll say that. So you can find that at battleshippretension.com.
very cool. And I'm Zach Brooks. You can follow me on Twitter at BrooksZA. I also have a podcast which has recently started back up called the Natty Bros Podcast, and bro has an H at the end. So the Twitter handle for that is at Natty Bros. You can find us at nattybros.com. Right now, we've been doing a lot of top 10 lists, and we're going to start really having that as our theme. So, in honor of Godzilla coming out this weekend, we actually did a top 10 disaster movies podcast earlier this week. So,
Very
and
exciting.
more of those to come. And of course, you can find movie recaps and TV recaps like this on Post Show Recaps. You can go to postshowrecaps.com, and you can follow Post Show Recaps at PS Recaps, and I think it's at PS. It's at Post Show Recaps, and the Twitter hashtag is hashtag PS Recaps. I know Rob and Josh will be back on Sunday night to recap the latest Game of Thrones episode, and I'm sure they have plenty of more podcasts coming up this week, both TV recaps and movie recaps coming up. So.
It is finale week for. I guess that's more Rob has a podcast, but it is finale week for Survivor and Amazing Race. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a very busy week for Rob. I'm assuming he is not going to have time to go see Godzilla.
Yeah, I did it. I invited him along, knowing full well like this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And I will say, recently, Zach and Jeremiah Panhorst and myself, like a week ago, we recorded about the top 10 superhero movies of all time. So you can find that at postshowrecaps.com.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. It was a great discussion.
A lot of fun and very long.
And I've been wanting to watch a lot of movies since that. I think I've already watched X-Men 2, and I want to watch the original Batman again. So.
The original Batman. I want to hear those Prince songs.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the recap of Godzilla, and tweet using the hashtag PS Recaps to let us know what you thought.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.